There are moments in life that split your world in two, before and after. Not the big, dramatic moments you see in movies, not explosions or disasters. No, the moments that truly break you are quiet. They happen in ordinary rooms, with ordinary words, from someone you trusted completely. Her name was Maya, and on a cold Tuesday morning in November, she sat in a small, barely furnished apartment, the kind of apartment where the heater only works half the time, where the walls are so thin you can hear the neighbor's television through them. And she stared at a phone screen that had just delivered two pieces of news that would change her life forever. The first piece of news, she had lost her job. The second piece of news, the man she loved, the man she had been with for 4 years, the man she had cooked for, cried with, believed in, built dreams with, had just sent her a text message that read, "And I want you to hear every single word of this. Maya, I've been thinking a lot. I can't do this anymore. You have no stability, no direction. I need someone who has their life together. I'm sorry. Don't call me." That was it. No conversation, no phone call, no looking her in the eyes. Just 11 sentences and a period at the end, like she was a bill being closed. Like 4 years of love could be summarized and dismissed in a text message. His name was Daniel, and on that cold Tuesday morning, Daniel walked out of Maya's life because she was broke. Now, I need you to understand something before we go any further, because this story, Maya's story, it's not just about a breakup. It's not just about money. It's about something deeper. It's about what happens when someone looks at you at your lowest point, decides you're not worth anything, and walks away. And then, 10 years later, has to face you across a boardroom table. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back. Because to understand how satisfying the ending of this story is, you need to feel the beginning. You need to sit in that apartment with Maya. You need to feel the cold. You need to hear the silence after she read that message. You need to understand exactly what Daniel took from her, so you can understand exactly what it meant when she took it all back. Maya grew up in a modest family. Her father worked 2 jobs most of his life, one at a warehouse during the day, one doing deliveries on weekends. Her mother cleaned houses, not because they were lazy, not because they lacked ambition, because life is sometimes unfair in ways that have nothing to do with how hard you work. But Maya was different from the start. She had this fire in her, this hunger. Teachers noticed it. Her parents noticed it. She was the kid who stayed after class to ask extra questions, who read books by flashlight under the covers, who made plans and lists and dreamed out loud about a future that looked nothing like her present. She got a partial scholarship to college, took out loans for the rest, worked part-time at a diner while studying full-time. She was exhausted every single day, but she was moving. She was building something. That's where she met Daniel. He was charming. God, was he charming. The kind of man who walks into a room and immediately makes you feel like you're the only person in it. Tall, well-dressed, not rich, but put together in a way that made him look like he had it all figured out. He came from a slightly better background than Maya. His parents were stable, middle class. His father had a small business. He had never known real financial struggle the way Maya had. And at first, that difference didn't matter. He loved her enthusiasm. She loved his steadiness. They balanced each other out, or so it seemed. They dated through the last 2 years of college. They made plans together. One day we'll have our own place. One day we'll travel. One day. But here's the thing about one day, it requires 2 people to keep believing in it. After graduation, reality hit. Jobs were hard to find. Maya hustled. She applied everywhere, took freelance work, picked up extra shifts at the diner while she searched. She was embarrassed by the struggle, but she never stopped moving. Daniel got a decent entry-level job at a marketing firm within 2 months of graduating. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. And slowly, so subtly that Maya almost didn't notice at first, his attitude began to shift. He started making small comments. "You really should have a plan by now. My coworkers think it's strange that you're still waitressing. I just thought you'd be further along." Each comment landed like a small stone dropped into still water. Small, but the ripples spread. Maya absorbed them, told herself he was just stressed, just practical, just being honest. That's what you do when you love someone. You find reasons to defend them even when they're hurting you. Then she got a job, a real one. Junior marketing coordinator at a small but growing tech startup. It wasn't high-paying, but it was a start. She was so happy. She called Daniel immediately. His response? Finally. Not congratulations. Not, I'm proud of you. Not, I knew you could do it. Finally, she laughed it off. but something in her registered it, filed it away. The job was hard. The startup environment was chaotic, long hours, constant changes, management that couldn't decide on direction. 8 months in, the company folded. Maya was let go along with half the staff. And that was the moment. That cold Tuesday morning. That text message. You have no stability. No direction. I need someone who has their life together. She sat with her phone in her hand for a long time after reading it. She didn't cry right away. That's the strange thing about real heartbreak. The tears don't always come immediately. First comes the stillness. The strange, hollow quiet of realizing that someone you loved completely never really saw you at all. They saw your circumstances. They saw your bank account balance. They saw your job title. But they never saw you. And when your circumstances got difficult, they left. Maya set her phone down on the kitchen counter. She walked to the window. She looked out at the gray November sky. And she made a decision. Not out loud, not dramatically, not the way it happens in movies. Just quietly, in the private space of her own heart. I am going to be okay. More than okay. And someday, he is going to understand exactly what he threw away. She didn't know how. She didn't know when. But she knew. And that quiet knowing, that ember of certainty burning in her chest, was the beginning of everything. Here's what nobody tells you about rock bottom. It doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't feel like a movie moment where the music swells and you stand up with fire in your eyes. Rock bottom feels like Tuesday. It feels like not knowing how you're going to make next month's rent. It feels like opening your refrigerator and doing math. That was Maya's life in the weeks after Daniel left. She gave herself 3 days. 3 days to feel everything: the grief, the humiliation, the anger. She stayed in her apartment, ate whatever was in the cupboards, cried until she couldn't anymore, and then lay in silence staring at the ceiling, having full conversations in her head with someone who wasn't there. She replayed everything. The way he used to look at her. The plans they made. The moments she thought were real. Were those real? Had she imagined the love? Had she seen what she wanted to see instead of what was actually there? This is what betrayal does to a person. It doesn't just break your heart. It breaks your confidence in your own judgment. It makes you question your memory, your instincts, yourself. On the 4th day, Maya got up. Not because she felt better. She didn't. She got up because the rent was due in 3 weeks and feelings don't pay rent. She made a list. That was always Maya's way. When the world felt out of control, she made lists. Structure was her anchor. The list had 3 sections. What I have, what I need, what I'm going to do. What she had: a laptop, a partial portfolio of marketing work from her previous job, a small emergency fund that would cover maybe 6 weeks of bare minimum living expenses, and a mind that, even in grief, never stopped working. What she needed: income. Any income. Immediately. What she was going to do: everything. She reached out to every contact she had: college classmates, former professors, people she'd worked with briefly at the startup. She signed up for freelance platforms. She offered social media management, content writing, basic graphic design, anything in the neighborhood of her skills. She gave herself 3 days. 3 days to feel everything: the grief, the humiliation, the anger. She stayed in her apartment, ate whatever was in the cupboards, cried until she couldn't anymore, and then lay in silence staring at the ceiling, having full conversations in her head with someone who wasn't there. She replayed everything. The way he used to look at her. The plans they made. The moments she thought were real. Were those real? Had she imagined the love? Had she seen what she wanted to see instead of what was actually there? This is what betrayal does to a person. It doesn't just break your heart. It breaks your confidence in your own judgment. It makes you question your memory, your instincts, yourself. On the 4th day, Maya got up. Not because she felt better. She didn't. She got up because the rent was due in 3 weeks and feelings don't pay rent. She made a list. That was always Maya's way. When the world felt out of control, she made lists. Structure was her anchor. The list had 3 sections. What I have, what I need, what I'm going to do. What she had: a laptop, a partial portfolio of marketing work from her previous job, a small emergency fund that would cover maybe 6 weeks of bare minimum living expenses, and a mind that, even in grief, never stopped working. What she needed: income. Any income. Immediately. What she was going to do: everything. She reached out to every contact she had: college classmates, former professors, people she'd worked with briefly at the startup. She signed up for freelance platforms. She offered social media management, content writing, basic graphic design, anything in the neighborhood of her skills. She gave herself 3 days. 3 days to feel everything: the grief, the humiliation, the anger. She stayed in her apartment, ate whatever was in the cupboards, cried until she couldn't anymore, and then lay in silence staring at the ceiling, having full conversations in her head with someone who wasn't there. She replayed everything. The way he used to look at her, the plans they made, the moments she thought were real. Were those real? Had she imagined the love? Had she seen what she wanted to see instead of what was actually there? This is what betrayal does to a person. It doesn't just break your heart. It breaks your confidence in your own judgment. It makes you question your memory, your instincts, yourself. On the fourth day, Maya got up. Not because she felt better. She didn't. She got up because the rent was due in 3 weeks and feelings don't pay rent. She made a list. That was always Maya's way. When the world felt out of control, she made lists. Structure was her anchor. The list had 3 sections. What I have, what I need, what I'm going to do. What she had: a laptop, a partial portfolio of marketing work from her previous job, a small emergency fund that would cover maybe 6 weeks of bare minimum living expenses, and a mind that, even in grief, never stopped working. What she needed: income. Any income. Immediately. What she was going to do: everything. She reached out to every contact she had: college classmates, former professors, people she'd worked with briefly at the startup. She signed up for freelance platforms. She offered social media management, content writing, basic graphic design, anything in the neighborhood of her skills. Maya heard through mutual friends, because mutual friends always find a way to deliver exactly the information you don't want, that Daniel was now dating someone named Claire. Claire worked in finance. Claire had a stable job and a nice apartment and, apparently, everything Daniel had decided Maya lacked. The first time Maya heard this, she felt it. That sharp, ugly feeling, part jealousy, part anger, part wounded pride. She won't pretend she didn't. She's human. But she sat with the feeling, let it pass through her. And then she did something powerful. She used it. Every time the hurt flared up, every time she saw something on social media that stung, every time a mutual friend mentioned his name, she translated the pain directly into work, into studying, into building. Anger is an energy. The question is whether it burns you or propels you. Maya chose propulsion. 6 months after Daniel left, she had a small but steady freelance business. 12 months after he left, she had her first proper client, a mid-sized e-commerce company that hired her on a monthly retainer to manage their digital marketing strategy. It wasn't glamorous. She was still working from her apartment, still watching her spending carefully, still a long way from where she wanted to be. But she was moving upward, steadily, relentlessly. There was one other thing that happened during this period, something small that would turn out to be very significant. Maya met someone named Rachel. Rachel was a client, a woman in her mid-40s who ran a consulting firm and had hired Maya to revamp her company's online presence. They were completely different people. Rachel was polished, experienced, calm in a way that came from decades of navigating difficult rooms. Maya was young, intense, still figuring out her edges. But Rachel saw something in her immediately. After their second project meeting, Rachel kept Maya back for a few minutes and said something that Maya would remember for the rest of her life. She said, "You're not working like someone building a freelance business. You're working like someone building an empire. Do you know that?" Maya didn't know what to say. Rachel continued, "I've worked with a lot of people over the years. Most of them work to the edge of what they're paid for and stop. You work past it every single time. That's rare. Don't let anyone make you small. Don't let anyone make you small." Maya thought about Daniel when she heard those words. About the text message. About finally. About no stability, no direction. She nodded at Rachel. And then she went home and worked until 2 in the morning. Because some people give you words of encouragement and it feels nice. And some people give you words of encouragement and it lights something in you that you're not sure will ever go out. Rachel's words were the second kind. 2 years after Daniel's text message, Maya moved out of that thin-walled apartment. It wasn't a penthouse. It was a 1-bedroom in a slightly better part of the city. With a real desk, she bought secondhand and a window that got afternoon light. But it felt like a palace, because she had paid for every inch of it herself, with her own work, her own decisions, her own mind. She stood in the empty apartment before the furniture arrived and just breathed for a minute. Look how far you've come, she thought. Then she called the moving company and got to work. By year 2, Maya's freelance work had evolved into something more structured. She had given it a name, a proper business name, and registered it officially. She now had 5 regular clients and a growing reputation in the city's startup and small business community as the woman who could make your brand come alive online. She was known for 2 things: results and reliability. She delivered what she promised, always on time, and consistently outperformed expectations. In a world full of people who overpromised and underdelivered, Maya was the opposite. She underpromised and then quietly blew the roof off. But she was also learning something important about the difference between being a good freelancer and being a real business owner. Freelancers trade time for money. You work, you get paid. You stop working, you stop getting paid. There's a ceiling on it, a physical ceiling. There are only so many hours in a day. Business owners build systems. They build teams. They build something that works even when they're not in the room. Maya wanted to be a business owner, a real one. She started slowly. Brought in one subcontractor, a graphic designer she'd collaborated with on a few projects, a young woman named Priya who was ridiculously talented and looking for steady work. They made a deal. Maya would bring the clients, handle the strategy and communication, manage the relationships. Priya would handle the visual execution. Together, they were better than either of them alone. Then they added a third person, a copywriter named James, then a part-time social media coordinator. It was happening. Quietly, carefully, brick by brick, Maya was building a team. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, she began to lose track of Daniel. Not completely, not immediately, but his presence in her mind, which had once been so loud, so sharp, so constantly painful, began to fade. Not because she forced it, but because she was so focused, so absorbed in what she was building, that the old wound simply had less room to breathe. This is what nobody tells you about the best revenge. The best revenge isn't a plan. It isn't something you scheme. It's what happens when you get so busy becoming extraordinary that you almost forget to be angry. Almost. Because she hadn't forgotten. Not really. The memory of that text message, stored somewhere deep and quiet, was still there. Like a stone at the bottom of a river. The water flows over it, around it. Everything moves and rushes forward, but the stone remains, unchanged, waiting. In year 3, Maya won her first major account. It was a tech company, not huge, but well-funded. A Series A startup building a platform for remote workforce management. They needed a full-scale digital marketing partner. Strategy, content, paid media, brand identity. The kind of account that would have been completely out of reach a year earlier. She pitched them herself. Spent 2 weeks preparing the proposal. Flew across the city for the meeting on her own money. No guarantees, no safety net. Just a presentation and a belief in what she had built. She walked in. She sat across the table from 4 people who looked very serious in very expensive chairs. And she delivered the best 40 minutes of her professional life. She got the account. She called her mother that night, and they both cried. The contract was worth more than she had made in her entire previous year combined. It wasn't life-changing on its own, not yet, but it was proof. Proof that she was operating at a different level now. Proof that the climb was real. She hired 2 more people, got a small office space, nothing fancy. Just a room with a door and a conference table, but a real space. A physical address. A place her team could come to and feel like they were part of something. Nothing the business world threw at her matched the specific weight of reading those 11 sentences and believing, for just a moment, that maybe he was right. That maybe she was nothing. She had survived that. She could survive anything. By year 5, Elevate Creative had a full team of 14 people, a portfolio of clients that included 2 publicly listed companies, a reputation that had grown far beyond the city, nationally, in industry circles. People were starting to know the name. Maya was invited to speak at a marketing conference, then another. Then she was asked to contribute to an industry publication, then another. The name Maya Chen, and I haven't told you her last name until now, and somehow it feels right to reveal it here. At the moment she begins to be known, the name Maya Chen was becoming a name that people recognized. She was 32 years old. She had been broke, abandoned, and dismissed. And now she was building something remarkable. She still thought about Daniel sometimes. Less often. Less painfully, but sometimes. She wondered if he ever thought about her, if he'd heard her name in business circles and felt even a flicker of recognition. She wondered what he was doing, whether life had given him everything he traded her for. She didn't know yet, but she was about to find out. Now let's talk about Daniel, because every story has two sides. And to truly understand what happened when these two people met again, to feel the full weight of it, you need to understand what the last 10 years had looked like from his side of the glass. Daniel Reeves had done everything right, or at least everything he believed was right. After he left Maya, he moved quickly. Within 3 months, he was fully committed to Claire. They moved in together inside a year. They looked good together. They made sense together, on paper. Daniel's career at the marketing firm progressed steadily. Not spectacularly, steadily. He got promoted twice in 4 years. Senior coordinator, then account manager. He was good at his job, reliable, presentable, the kind of employee that management likes because he never causes problems and always delivers at exactly the level expected of him. Exactly the level, no more. This was Daniel's limitation, and to his credit, he probably didn't even fully see it. He had been raised in an environment where stability was the highest value, where you worked hard enough to be secure, and then you maintained that security. You didn't swing for the fences. Swinging for the fences was for people who were reckless with their lives. He had genuinely believed that. He had genuinely looked at Maya's struggle in those early post-graduation years and seen recklessness rather than resilience. He had seen someone falling rather than someone fighting their way up. That was his fundamental error in judgment. And it was the kind of error that you only understand in retrospect, when you see what the person became after you dismiss them. After his second promotion, Daniel's career hit a plateau. The marketing firm was good, but it was also slow, a traditional agency with established clients, established processes, established ways of doing things. Ambitious young people moved up and then found themselves waiting years for a seat that an older executive wasn't vacating. Daniel waited. He was patient about it, outwardly. Inwardly, though he would never quite admit this to himself, there was a creeping restlessness, a quiet dissatisfaction that he couldn't fully name. He and Claire got married at year 4. Nice wedding. Good family on both sides. Photos that looked beautiful on social media. But the marriage was, and I say this without judgment, just honesty, functional, comfortable, two organized, practical people sharing a life that ran smoothly and quietly and without much fire. They were good to each other. They didn't fight much. They also didn't inspire much in each other. Daniel had chosen stability over spark. Over and over, in every area of his life, he had chosen the safe, predictable option. And then, in year 7, the marketing firm he worked at was acquired. Acquisitions are dangerous for middle management. The new owners came in, evaluated every position, and reorganized. Daniel survived the first round of cuts, but was moved sideways. His account manager role was restructured into something smaller, less influential, reporting to a new layer of management that hadn't been there before. He wasn't fired, but he was diminished. For a man who had built his identity around professional stability, who had left a relationship over someone else's perceived instability, this was a deeply uncomfortable experience. He started looking at other opportunities, applied to a few agencies, had some conversations, eventually landed at a new firm, a mid-sized creative agency called Meridian Group, as a senior account executive. A step up in title, a lateral move in reality. And here, at Meridian Group, Daniel settled. He was good at the job, managed his accounts well, his clients liked him, his colleagues respected him. He was, by all external measures, successful. But inside, if you could have sat with him quietly and asked him honestly, he would have told you that something was missing, that there was a version of his life that felt like it should have been bigger, more significant, more his. He never quite articulated what that missing thing was. He didn't have the vocabulary for it, because he had spent so many years telling himself that the things he had were exactly the right things to want. Stability, security, predictability. What Daniel had never understood, what he had looked at in Maya and failed to see, was that some people aren't built for stillness. Some people need to stretch towards something, and their stretching isn't recklessness. It's how they breathe. He had called that reckless. He had called it instability. He had ended a relationship over it. And now he sat at a desk in Meridian Group's open plan office, managing accounts that were fine and doing work that was fine, married to a woman he cared for and living a life that was fine. Fine. What a terrible word when you think about it. Fine. It was around year 8 that Daniel started hearing a name. At first it was just in passing. A colleague mentioning a campaign that had made waves. Did you see what Elevate Creative did for that tech client? That campaign was brilliant. Then at an industry event, someone brought it up again. Elevate Creative is killing it right now. Have you met the founder? Maya Chin? She's something else. Maya Chin. He stopped, blinked. There are lots of Mayas in the world. It probably wasn't, but something in him already knew. He went home that night and looked up Elevate Creative, found the company website, professional, beautifully designed, scrolled to the About page, the founder bio, and there she was. Maya. His Maya. Except, not his Maya anymore. Someone else's Maya. No, her own Maya. Maya, who had built an agency with 14 people and a portfolio that included companies he recognized. Maya, who had spoken at conferences he'd seen advertised. Maya, who looked, in her professional headshot, like someone who had not just survived but completely, entirely, unapologetically thrived. He stared at the screen for a long time. He told himself he felt proud of her, and maybe part of him did, but mostly, underneath all the stories he told himself about himself, he felt something else. Something small and sharp and uncomfortable. He felt the full weight of a choice he'd made 10 years ago. A moment he'd thought was practical and sensible and right. A text message he'd sent from a place of judgment rather than faith. He closed the laptop. He didn't tell Claire. He didn't tell anyone. He went to bed and lay there in the dark and thought about that cold November morning. About a young woman sitting in a thin-walled apartment. And how wrong he had been. Year 10. Maya was 34 years old, and Elevate Creative was at a turning point. The agency had grown steadily, built its reputation carefully, won accounts through genuine excellence. But Maya had always known there was a next level, a tier of clients that required a different kind of infrastructure. Not just talent, not just strategy, size, resources, the kind of capabilities that came with proper backing. Victor Hargrove was connected to a private equity group that was building a portfolio of marketing services companies, essentially bringing strong boutique agencies together into a larger, more powerful entity. It wasn't a buyout. It was a partnership, one that would give Elevate Creative access to shared resources, larger client networks, and the kind of institutional backing that could accelerate growth significantly. Several firms were in consideration, and one of those firms was Meridian Group, the same Meridian Group where Daniel Reeves worked as a senior account executive. When Maya first received the briefing documents, a list of companies being considered, with executive summaries, she scrolled through the names and stopped at Meridian Group. She read the executive summary. A solid firm, good client retention, reasonable revenue, senior staff listed by name and title. Daniel Reeves, Senior Account Executive. She read his name twice. Then she set the document down, stood up from her desk, walked to the window of her office, a real office now, with a real view, in a real building that said Elevate Creative in the lobby directory, and stood there looking out at the city for a long moment. Here's what I want you to understand about Maya in this moment, because this is where character is revealed. This is where we see not just what she had built on the outside, the agency, the team, the reputation, but what she had built on the inside. She didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. She didn't feel anger, exactly. What she felt was something quieter, harder to name. Something like, oh, so the world has a sense of humor after all. She went back to her desk. She read the rest of the documents. She prepared for the meetings. She did not mention Daniel's name to anyone. She was professional. She was always professional. The joint evaluation meeting was scheduled 3 weeks later. It would take place at Elevate Creative's offices, neutral ground in theory, but of course it wasn't neutral at all. It was her ground, her building, her conference room, her table. The Meridian Group team arrived at 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning. 3 people, their director of business development, their head of client services, and 1 senior account executive, included because of his deep familiarity with their largest existing accounts. Daniel Reeves. Maya was in the conference room when they were brought in. She was standing near the window, the same way she had once stood at a different window, 10 years ago, with nothing in her hands and a text message that had tried to reduce her to nothing. She turned when the door opened, and she watched Daniel Reeves walk into her conference room. He saw her immediately. Of course he did. You don't forget a face like that. You don't forget someone who was once the center of your world, no matter how hard you try to rewrite the story. His face, and there were other people in the room, so he managed it quickly, but not quickly enough, went through several things at once. Recognition, surprise, something that looked very much like a man suddenly realizing that the floor beneath his feet is not as solid as he thought it was. He recovered. He was professional too. He shook hands. He sat down. He opened his folder. Maya, because she had spent 10 years learning exactly how to be composed in rooms that mattered, welcomed everyone smoothly, introduced her team, offered coffee, and moved into the agenda. She didn't make it strange. She didn't make it about them. Because the meeting wasn't about them. The meeting was about the business. And in the business, she was in charge. That right there was the revenge. Not cruelty, not confrontation, just competence, just power, just the simple, unassailable fact of her presence in that room as the decision-maker. They worked through the evaluation agenda. Maya asked sharp questions, not to be difficult, but because she genuinely needed to assess whether a partnership made strategic sense. She pressed on areas where Meridian's numbers didn't tell the full story. She identified gaps in their client service methodology with a precision that clearly impressed some people in the room and visibly unsettled others. When it was Daniel's turn to speak to the accounts he managed, he was good. He was professional. He knew his clients well, presented clearly, handled questions competently. But every time he spoke, he was speaking to Maya, and both of them knew it. At one point, just once, during a break, when the others had stepped out briefly and they happened to find themselves near the coffee station at the same moment, Daniel spoke to her directly. Maya, just her name, like a question. She looked at him, calm, measured. The same composure she brought to every difficult room. Daniel, a pause. He looked like a man who had rehearsed something and was now finding that the rehearsed words didn't fit the real moment. You've built something incredible. She held his gaze. She didn't rush to fill the silence. Yes, she said. I have. That was all. Someone came back into the room. They both returned to the table. Professional. Composed. But those 4 words, yes, I have carried 10 years in them. They carried that cold apartment, those thin walls, those sleepless early mornings. They carried every comment about stability and direction. They carried everything he had dismissed when he sent that text message. Yes, I have. The meeting concluded. The Meridian Group team gathered their materials and were escorted out. Daniel was the last one out the door. He paused, just for a moment, and looked back. She was already talking to one of her colleagues, already back in her world, already moving forward. He left. She had a second meeting in 20 minutes. She prepared for it. And that evening, alone in her office after everyone had gone home, she finally let herself feel the fullness of the day. The strange, complicated, unexpectedly quiet emotion of it. Not triumph. Not vindication. Something softer. Completion. That's the word. Like a loop that had been open for 10 years had gently, finally closed. In the weeks that followed, Maya's team compiled their full assessment of Meridian Group. The numbers were solid. Their client retention was strong. Their operational processes were sound. As a potential partner in the portfolio structure, they met the basic criteria. But Maya's analysis identified a significant issue with Meridian's strategic direction. Their leadership was conservative to a fault. They were holding on to methodologies that had worked 5 years ago, but were increasingly behind the curve in a rapidly evolving industry. The clients they retained were loyal, but new business acquisition was weak. They weren't keeping pace with where marketing was going. Her recommendation, submitted to Victor and the private equity group, was conditional. Meridian Group could be a viable partner, but only with significant leadership restructuring and a strategic overhaul. The current leadership team, in Maya's assessment, did not have the vision or the appetite for the kind of change required. The private equity group took her assessment seriously. They pushed back on Meridian's leadership team with a set of strategic requirements. Meridian's leadership did not respond well. There were tense conversations. 2 senior leaders left in disagreement. The business development director, who had sat in Maya's conference room, chose not to continue. In the restructuring conversation that followed, Maya's team was asked to assess existing Meridian staff, who would be retained, who would be transitioned, and who might be capable of stepping into expanded roles. Daniel Reeves came up in the assessment. And here's where the story gets interesting, because here is where Maya had a choice. A real one. She could have written him off, given him a standard assessment and moved on. She could have, if she'd been a smaller person and nobody would have blamed her, found a way to let the restructuring process quietly eliminate his position. She didn't. She gave him an honest assessment, because that's who she was. And she thought about this carefully, consciously, she wasn't interested in being the kind of person who used professional power for personal score settling. Her honest assessment of Daniel was technically strong, client relationship skills above average, strategic vision limited, comfort with innovation low, but trainable if the right structure was in place. A contributor, not a leader. That was the truth. And she wrote it exactly like that. When the restructuring was finalized, Meridian Group was formally brought into the portfolio. The combined operation was placed under Elevate Creative's strategic leadership, which meant, to put it simply, to put it in the most ordinary and extraordinary terms at once, Maya Chen was now the senior person responsible for the division that Daniel Reeves worked in. She was, in every professional sense that mattered, his boss. Not by design, not as a revenge scheme, not as something she had engineered from the beginning, simply as the outcome of 10 years of choosing excellence over bitterness, of building something real, of proving not to him, but to herself and to the world, what she was made of. The organizational chart announced it plainly. Elevate Creative, founder and CEO, Maya Chen. Beneath it, the combined marketing services division. Beneath that, several senior account leads, among them, Daniel Reeves. When the announcement went out to staff across both organizations, the internal messaging was standard. Professional restructuring language, role definitions, reporting structures. But Daniel read it, and he understood what it said. Not just the organizational language, what it actually said. He wrote her an email that evening. Not a company email, a personal one. He wrote, Maya, I've been thinking about what to say for a while now. I'm not sure I'll get this right. What you've built is extraordinary, and I owe you something I should have paid a long time ago. I was wrong, not just about leaving the way I did, about what I believed when I left. I looked at you and I saw instability, and what was actually in front of me was someone with more strength than I could understand at the time. I'm sorry. You don't owe me anything, but I wanted you to know that the person who sent you that message 10 years ago was wrong about the most important thing he ever walked away from. Maya read it twice. She sat quietly for a moment, and then she responded. She wrote, Daniel, thank you for this. I won't pretend it doesn't matter. It does. I needed to hear something like this, even if I'm hearing it 10 years later than I should have. I want you to know that what I've built has nothing to do with you and everything to do with me. The best thing you ever did for me was leave. Not because you were right to leave the way you did, you weren't, but because it forced me to find out who I was when I had nothing left to lean on. I'm glad I found out. I genuinely wish you well. See you at work. She pressed send, closed her laptop, went home, slept better than she had in years. The news traveled the way news always travels in professional communities. Not loudly, not all at once, but steadily from person to person, in the quiet corners of industry events and professional networks and coffee conversations. Maya Chen, the Elevate Creative founder, had structured a deal that brought Meridian Group under her operational leadership. Brilliant move. Strategic. Bold. And then the other part of the story started to travel. The human part. The part that people in professional circles leaned in to hear. Because people are human and they love a story with weight. There were those who remembered Daniel and Maya from years ago. Not many, but some. Mutual acquaintances from college. People who had worked with one or both of them in the early days. And slowly, in the way of these things, the pieces connected. The man who had left her for being broke. The woman who became his boss. Maya was invited to speak at a major industry conference around this time. A keynote address. Her first truly large-stage speaking opportunity. Several hundred people. The kind of room that announces arrival. She didn't name Daniel. Not once. She wasn't there to publicly shame someone or to make herself the hero of a revenge story. She was there to speak to the people in that room who knew something about being dismissed. She started like this. At some point in your life, and if it hasn't happened yet, it probably will. Someone you trusted looked at you in a hard moment and decided you weren't worth the investment. Maybe they said it directly. Maybe they just left. And in the aftermath, the most dangerous voice in the room wasn't theirs. It was yours. The part of you that wondered if maybe they were right. The room was very quiet. She continued. The most powerful choice I ever made wasn't a business decision. It wasn't a strategic move or a smart hire or a well-timed pitch. It was the decision, made in complete private, in complete uncertainty, That what someone else believed about my value was not the final word on my value. That was the beginning of everything. She talked for 45 minutes about building, about failure and resilience, about what it takes to grow something real in a world that doesn't wait for you to feel ready. At the end, when the applause came, and it was long, and it was genuine, the kind that comes from people who felt something, not just people being polite, Maya stood at the podium for a moment and looked out at the room. She thought of the apartment, the heater that worked half the time, the text message, finally, the empty refrigerator and the list she made and Rachel's words and Victor's investment and 14 staff members and the conference room where she had stood composed while someone reckoned with the weight of their own choices. She thought about all of it in the space of a few seconds. And she smiled, genuinely, fully. Not at Daniel, not at anyone who had ever doubted her, at herself, at the woman she had built, at the extraordinary, unlikely, unglamorous, hard-won, beautiful thing that was her life. Maya Chen, at 34, is the CEO of a marketing services group that employs over 60 people across 2 offices. Elevate Creative has a national client portfolio. She is regularly featured in industry publications as one of the most significant emerging voices in digital marketing strategy. She serves as a mentor to young entrepreneurs, particularly young women starting from difficult circumstances, and she takes that part of her work as seriously as she takes the business. She is not defined by what Daniel did. She says this clearly when people ask, and people do ask, because the story is known now, in the way that stories become known. She says, "The breakup was the catalyst, but I was always the engine. He didn't create what I became. He just cleared the track." She is in a relationship now. Someone she met 3 years ago, a quiet, steady man named Marcus, who works in urban architecture and builds things with his hands, and has the specific kind of confidence that comes from people who don't need to tear others down to feel tall. He believed in her from the first month. She didn't have to earn it. She bought an apartment, not the one from the early days, a real one, with a view, in a building that has her name on the resident directory and makes no apologies for itself. She calls her parents every week. Her father, the man who worked 2 jobs, who delivered packages on weekends so his daughter could dream, came to her office once and stood in the lobby and read the directory and said nothing for a long moment. Then he put his hand on her shoulder. He didn't need words. She understood. Daniel Reeves works in the combined marketing division under Elevate Creative's operational umbrella. He is a senior account lead. He is good at his job. He is not miserable, but he is, if you asked him honestly, in a quiet moment, still grappling with something. Not jealousy exactly, not bitterness, more like understanding. The slow, uncomfortable understanding of what it means to be a person who looked at extraordinary potential and called it a liability, who stood at the edge of something rare and walked away because it didn't yet look the way he expected value to look. He and Claire divorced 2 years ago, amicably as these things go. 2 people who were compatible in theory but never, in practice, lit anything in each other. He thinks about Maya sometimes. Not in a romantic way. That chapter is genuinely closed and he knows it. He thinks about her in the way you think about your own mistakes when they've crystallized into wisdom. He has become, and this is perhaps the strangest outcome of all, a better person in some ways for having been confronted with his own error so concretely. He works hard. He shows up. He is kinder, more patient with people in their difficult seasons than he was at 24. There is a version of his story, still unwritten, that ends well for him too. Rachel sold her consulting firm and now advises early-stage companies. She and Maya have lunch every few months. Rachel takes gentle credit for spotting Maya early. Maya lets her, because it is true, and because she has learned that being gracious about the people who helped you is not weakness, it is accuracy. Victor Hargrove sent Maya a bottle of good champagne when the partnership deal closed, with a note that said simply, "I knew." She keeps the note. Priya, the graphic designer from the early days, is now Elevate Creative's creative director, one of the founding members of something that started as just 2 people and a shared belief that together they could be excellent. So, here we are, 10 years, 2 people, 1 cold apartment, 1 text message, and everything that came after. What do we do with a story like this? I could wrap it in a bow. I could tell you this is a story about revenge and leave you with the satisfying image of a woman standing powerful in a room while the man who dismissed her reckons with his choices. That's part of it, but it's not the whole of it. This is a story about what we do when someone decides for us that we are not enough. Because it happens to almost everyone in some form. Maybe it's a partner like Maya. Maybe it's a parent or a friend or a colleague or a system that looks at where you come from and decides what you're capable of before you've had the chance to show them. And in that moment, in the immediate aftermath of being dismissed, there is a choice, a real one. You can believe them. It's the easiest thing to do. It's the path of least resistance. When someone with confidence tells you that you are lacking, especially someone you love, someone whose opinion matters to you, a part of your mind looks for confirmation, looks for the evidence that they might be right. Maya sat with that choice for 3 days. She felt the pull of it. That terrible voice. Maybe he's right. Maybe I am nothing. And then she made a different choice. Not because she was extraordinary. Not because she had some advantage or special gift that the rest of us don't have. But because she decided quietly, privately, without knowing how it would turn out, that someone else's moment of certainty about her was not going to be the final word on her story. She decided to write the rest of it herself. That's the choice. That's always the choice. And here's the thing about Daniel that I want to sit with for a moment, because this story is more complex than simple villainy. Daniel wasn't a monster. He was a man with a limited imagination. He could not see, in the young woman struggling in that apartment, what she would become. He lacked the vision, or maybe the faith, to hold on through difficulty and believe that the person mattered more than the circumstances. There are a lot of Daniels in the world. People who evaluate love and friendship and partnership based on current conditions rather than core character. People who see the storm and miss the person standing in it. People who mistake struggle for failure and stability for virtue. If you have a Daniel in your life, someone who looked at your worst moment and decided it was your final destination, I want you to hear this clearly. Their assessment of you was a reflection of their own limited vision, not a verdict on your potential. The world is full of people who will decide what you're worth based on what you currently have, what you currently look like, where you currently stand. Very few people have the wisdom to look past the present moment into the possible person. Be the kind of person who can see that in yourself first, in others too. And to those who are in the middle of it right now, sitting with the fresh hurt of someone's dismissal, wondering if maybe they were right, let me tell you what Maya's story says to you. The list. Start with the list. What do you have? What do you need? What are you going to do? Not tomorrow. Not when you feel better. Now. Because here is the quiet truth that Maya's decade of building reveals. The feelings catch up. The confidence comes back. The wound heals, not all at once, not without scarring, but it heals. And scar tissue in the human spirit is often stronger than what was there before. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to know how the story ends. You just have to get up on the 4th day, take the small job, deliver more than they paid for, call your mentor, say yes to the meeting even when you're scared. Build one brick at a time and trust that bricks, placed carefully and consistently, eventually become something you can stand inside. Something no one can text you out of. Something that has your name on the door. There's a moment near the end of great stories, near the end of long journeys, where the noise quiets, where all the drama and the heartbreak and the late nights and the early mornings and the small victories and the significant losses all settle into something simple, something you can hold in one hand. For Maya, that moment came on an ordinary morning. She arrived at her office early, as she often did. The city was still quiet. Her building lobby was empty. She took the elevator to her floor, unlocked the office, walked to her desk, and sat down. She looked at the room around her. The team photos on the wall. The small cactus on the windowsill that had been there since the first week in the space. The whiteboard covered in strategy notes from the day before. The quiet hum of a building beginning its day. She opened her laptop, and before she started her emails, before she looked at her calendar, before the day rushed in with its demands and decisions, she took 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds. And she thought about where she had started. The thin-walled apartment. The cold November morning. The text message. The 3 days. The list. The small jobs. Priya and her designs. Rachel and her words. Victor and his belief. The proposal she flew across the city to deliver. The account she won. The 14 people who trusted her enough to work for something she was building. The conference room. Daniel's face. The speech. the applause, Marcus, and the way he looked at her. Her father in the lobby, hand on her shoulder, no words needed. 30 seconds. And then she opened her email and started the next chapter. This is what I want to leave you with. The best ending to a story like this is not a scene of triumph, not a villain brought low, not a hero standing on a mountaintop while the credits roll. The best ending is an ordinary morning, a quiet office, a woman at a desk who spent 10 years building something that could not be taken by a text message, who learned, through the most painful kind of tuition, that her worth was never in anyone else's hands to grant or revoke. She didn't need Daniel to be ruined for her story to be complete. She just needed to be free of him. And she was. She had been free of him for years, really. From the moment she stopped letting his words live rent-free in her mind and started using that space for something better. That's the real revenge. Not the conference room. Not the org chart. Not the, yes, I have. The real revenge was the freedom, the lightness of building a life that was entirely, authentically, powerfully hers. And if you're listening to this, and you recognize yourself somewhere in Maya's story, if you know what it feels like to be dismissed, to be underestimated, to be valued only in terms of what you currently have rather than who you fundamentally are, I want you to know something. Your chapter isn't finished. The person who left you for your struggle doesn't get to write your ending. The employer who overlooked you doesn't get to define your ceiling. The family member who doubted you doesn't get the last word. You do. You always have. It might take time. It almost certainly will. The climb is real and it is long, and there will be cold mornings and thin-walled apartments and empty refrigerators and moments where the small voice says maybe they were right. That voice is wrong. Get up on the 4th day, make the list, build the thing. And one day, not because you planned it, not because you schemed it, but simply because excellence has a way of creating its own justice. The world will arrange itself so that someone who once decided you were nothing will have to look you in the eyes and understand exactly what they dismissed. And you will be composed, you will be professional, you will be kind, and you will say, simply, in whatever words are true for you in that moment, yes, I have, and it will be enough, more than enough. It will be everything.